Please welcome to the stage, leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer.
No rabbits, no risks. Labour's manifesto launch was a continuation of a campaign strategy to reduce the size of the target for Tory attacks. And Keir Starmer's pledge not to raise taxes on working families was centre stage.
So let me spell it out. We will not raise income tax. We will not raise national insurance. We will not raise VAT. That is a manifesto commitment. There may be some people here today who say, where's the surprise? Where's the rabbit out of the hat? To which I say, if you want politics as pantomime, I hear Clapton is nice this time of year.
The only surprise was a climate change protester.
My generation is being let down by the...
His response now well practised.
We gave up on being a party of protest 5 years ago. We want to be a party of power.
To underline that claim, he took a swipe at the leader he used to back.
Jeremy Corbyn is not just not a Labour candidate, he's expelled from this party. That is how much change we have brought around.
He committed to £8 billion worth of tax rises on well-trailed policies like VAT on school fees, closing non-dom loopholes, redirected to helping cut NHS queues and funding teachers.
For everybody who's got the document, is in the last few pages, about page 109. Rachel is demonstrating the page that says every policy is fully costed and fully funded. She's got it open. She wrote every word of it.
But there's no guaranteed money for great swathes of the public sector, which Labour says are in a ruinous state. Keir Starmer says they'll get the money when there's economic growth. He was asked, what if the growth doesn't turn up?
This manifesto is a total rejection of that defeatist approach, that the only levers are tax and spend. It's a total rejection of that. It's a plan for growth. I accept there's no magic wand. I accept that you don't get growth without a plan, and I have absolute confidence in the plan for growth that we're putting before the country. And I will not accept the defeatism that says all that we can hope for in this country is to flatline. That is the absolute opposite of the hope that we inject through this manifesto.
Well, I don't think it's defeatist to say that growth might not happen, because growth might not happen. A wise government plans, it hopes for the best, but plans for things that aren't the best. Much the biggest promises in the manifesto are the negative ones. No increases in a whole range of taxes, no increase in debt over a parliament. But what we heard very little about was how Labour would actually deal with what they set out as a big range of problems with the public services, with the welfare system. But there's no promises effectively for any additional spending on that, and there's no sense of whether they would raise any significant additional money from increasing taxes.
Any attempt to find out if there are secret tax plans beyond the self-denying pledges met with rigid message discipline here in Manchester. You're very clear you think the tax burden on working people is as high as it could possibly be, maybe too high. Is the tax burden on unearned income too high, or is there a bit of headroom?
I want taxes to come down. The tax burden is at its highest level in 70 years. That's why this manifesto focuses on how we can grow the economy.
Rishi Sunak, attending a G7 summit of leaders in Italy, got a warm welcome from the host, Italy's far-right Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. The Tories called Labour's a tax trap manifesto and said the party, if elected, would go much further than the small tax rises listed today. One of the warm-up speeches before Keir Starmer spoke today was delivered by a late convert from the Conservatives, the boss of Iceland Stores. You said the grim years of conservatism are over. It's not long since you were trying to be a candidate.
Well, yeah.
Last year?
Certainly had
What happened? What changed?
a bit of an epiphany that the Tories were moving away
Is that what happened, or is it
standards
just
and principles.
sour grapes because they wouldn't give you a seat?
No. Well, they definitely didn't want me, that's for sure.
I watched you there. You weren't clapping when he tried to get everyone clapping against Jeremy Corbyn. Did that stick in the throat a bit?
My hands are sore, the amount of clapping I've done.
Cast your memory back a long way to 97.
Okay.
There was a lot more hope then, wasn't there?
It was, because the truth is, whatever you thought about the Thatcher period and the John Major period, you could point to things that are dramatically changed, and some for the better.
After the manifesto launch, I spoke to Keir Starmer on his battle bus and put to him the Institute for Fiscal Studies' criticism that he wasn't telling us what he'd do about the public sector. These elements of the public realm, which you've been criticising for ages, you think have been utterly neglected, you think are like a sort of boiler in the attic that's about to explode, you're not telling us, you're not being candid about what you're going to spend on them to turn them round. Because it's that or austerity cuts, and you say you don't want to do that.
Well, so far in this election campaign, we've had lots of discussion about increasing tax or decreasing spending. I reject the idea that they are the only two things a government can do. We can build and grow our economy, which will give us the yield that we need for our public services.
But you know that growth won't come immediately.
Well, just hear me out.
Even if it all works, it won't come immediately.
If we'd had growth in the last 14 years at the same rate as the last Labour government, we'd have tens of billions of pounds to invest in our public services without raising a single tax. That is the failure of the last 14 years.
Absolutely.
But these steps, in terms of how quickly we can do this, we've already had discussions, as you would imagine, with the investors that we want to partner with to put in place the projects we need. They say to me that what's held them back so far is the instability in our economy.
Absolutely.
So we'll stabilise the economy.
You might start the process, but you won't get that growth straight away. You will have to either inflict some very deep cuts, as currently outlined in the government's plans, or you're going to have to raise taxes beyond the ones you're talking about not touching.
Look, I'm rejecting this proposition that this country can't do any better than it's done for the last 14 years.
I heard what you said in the press conference just now. You were asked what happens if, say, growth gets knocked off course, and you said that's defeatism. That sounded Maoist.
No, look, can we change our planning rules straight away? Some of it without legislation? Yes, we can. Can we set up Great British Energy straight away, this publicly owned company? Yes, we can. Can we set up a national wealth fund straight away? Have we already talked to those that will invest with us? But I totally reject the proposition that the last 14 years have been pretty awful, and this proposition that it can never get better than that.
But that wasn't the proposition. That's not what I'm asking you about. I'm asking you to engage with reality. It's not defeatist to say you might get knocked off course. You're saying the world out there is a very insecure, dangerous place. All sorts of things could happen that can mean you don't get growth. You've got to engage with that.
I'm confident in our plans for growth.
Can I ask you a separate question, because I'm getting lots of signals from over your shoulder.
Unlike the Tory Party manifesto, these aren't just half-thought-through policies thrown on the table at the last minute. We've been working on these for 4 years with the partners that are going, we hope, to deliver them with us. I'm utterly confident in them, and I utterly reject the proposition that we cannot do better than we've done in the last 14 years.
You're quite clear that the burden of taxation on families, on people, on working families, you say that's too high. It's already too high. Yes. You don't want it to go any higher. What about the burden of taxes on unearned income? Too high? Bit of headroom? You've already made a bit of an inroad on it today.
Well, we've already announced, pre-announced,
but
the tax rises we will make.
Is there more headroom? Is that where the whole election's been a bit like a game of sort of 20 questions, really, hasn't it? You're a tax rise, and we're all trying to guess what you are, and you're saying you keep ruling some of them out, and we're trying to work out which one is really your name, and is your name capital gains tax?
We've set out exactly in relation to working people, no increase in income tax, national insurance or VAT. We've fully costed and fully funded all our plans. They do not require tax rises over and above those that we have.
But we all know that word
set
plans.
We've set out.
But that word plans can be part of a non-denial denial. We have no planned tax increases beyond what we're telling you about. Reminds me of Tony Blair in 1997 talking about we have no plans to do tuition fees. It's a classic non-denial denial out of the sort of textbook of how to do it.
I'm a different Labour leader. I accept in the past that Labour leaders and other leaders
You're going to really do this?
Thought there were only two levers. One is tax and the other is spend.
You mean it? There's not going to be an autumn budget when you say, oh, we opened the bonnet, aghast, look at this, it's really horrible. We are actually going to do some tax rises.
We're going for growth.
You're not going to do that.
Our manifesto is for growth. It's a plan for growth. That has been the missing ingredient for 14 years. We intend to turn that around.
Keir Starmer, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Well, as we've seen, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is away from the election campaign to attend the G7 summit in Italy. But he took the time to criticise Labour's manifesto, accusing the party of asking the public to write a blank cheque.
You've seen two manifestos this week, and there's a clear choice at this election. We published a manifesto that's going to cut taxes for people in this country, and the Labour manifesto that was published today made it clear that taxes are going to rise. Multiple independent sources demonstrate that the tax burden under Labour will rise to the highest levels in history.
Well, Labour retorts that its manifesto is fully costed, but as we've been hearing, it's heavily dependent on economic growth. So with me now to take a closer look at the numbers is our economics correspondent, Helia Ebrahimi. Helia.
Well, Kathy, this is a modest manifesto that hopes growth will do all the heavy lifting, as you were saying. On the one hand, it's got these big, bold, ambitious ideas on long-termism, in infrastructure and industrial strategy. But on the other hand, its ideas on spending is quite piecemeal. For example, it says that Britain has an endemic problem with child poverty, but then its solutions are things like breakfast clubs. And while it says its manifesto is fully costed, that completely sidesteps the issue that it's chosen to inherit plans that imply huge, massive cuts to unprotected departments. But let's have a look at that manifesto, because they've added £8.5 billion of extra taxes. They want to spend £4.8 billion on things like extra nurseries. There's a £4.7 billion boost to capital investment, which they'll be funding through £3.5 billion of extra funding. But Kathy, all of that is teeny tiny, and I'll show you why. This is what the government spends and raises in taxation in 1 year alone. And this chart isn't even to scale, otherwise it would be going through the roof.
So take us through in a bit more detail about what Labour is saying on tax.
Well, the first problem is that they've cornered themselves by making all these promises that national insurance won't go up, income tax won't go up, VAT won't go up, and now corporation tax won't go up. There are some smaller taxes they could go after, but don't forget that Labour's not reversing the freeze on personal tax thresholds, which means in the next Parliament, as a proportion of national income, it is still the tax take going to be at record levels. In fact, it's going to be even higher. The other problem is that they've hemmed themselves to this fiscal straitjacket on borrowing, while at the same time promising no austerity. Now, that is akin to trying to balance an elephant on a hairpin.
That's such an image. Is the economic growth they need actually going to turn up?
Yeah,
then?
the big hope, growth. Well, let me show you what the OBR think growth is going to be. Everyone complains that the OBR is very negative. But actually, these numbers are quite optimistic, because take a look at what the independent forecasters think. Not so rosy. And the problem is that Labour want to grow at something like 2.5%. Now, it is not the same world that Labour inherited back in 1997, and that could really stymie them.
So what are the chances? Is it realistic?
Well, I'm going to show you my last chart, and this is perhaps why Labour is so keen to keep talking up the partnership with business. This is business investment. You see that first line, it crashes in the economic crisis, but then the trend line suggests after Brexit, it's going to continue to go up, except in reality, it doesn't. It just flatlines. Now, if Labour can close this gap and some other things, then happy days. If they can't, then they're going to have some horrendous choices when it comes to spending, when it comes to taxation, and when it comes to borrowing.
Love your charts, Helia. Thanks very much. Well, now to Kieran in Leeds.
Thanks, Kathy. Well, the polls are all suggesting the election is Labour's to lose. But how did the party's manifesto go down with voters? Well, Rugby is one of the many Conservative-held constituencies Labour is targeting. Mark Pawsey won it in 2019 with a 13,000-vote majority. Our Claire Fallon's been finding out what people there make of what Labour have to offer.
They say elections are won and lost at the margins. But we're in the middle, geographically, in an area Labour wants and needs to win over. Talking to the voters, Keir Starmer hopes to convince with today's manifesto.
I liked it in the days when Maggie Thatcher was in charge.
For decades, the vote in this area has mirrored the result of general elections. And Patricia and Bob have backed the party that's won every time. What would Labour need to say to get you to switch from voting Tory?
They've got all the figures, every party got all the figures. Lay it down in black and white and saying this is how much it's going to cost every man, woman, child in this country, and then let them decide. And that's the only way you'll get me to vote.
So actually be honest about...
Honesty.
What, taxes going up?
Yeah, what taxes are going up? Don't put any mirrors behind them. You know, it's just smoke and mirrors all the while. You know, just be perfectly honest with the public.
Would you vote for a party that said they're going to put taxes up to fix things?
We all want things, and if taxes have to go up, they have to go up.
We haven't got a strong enough government. We haven't got a strong enough leader.
At 84, John is a lifelong Conservative voter. But this could be the year when that changes. So is your vote to be won at the moment?
At the moment, I like Nigel Farage, right? I think Nigel Farage speaks the truth. With all these immigrants that's coming to the country, you know, why can't we just send them back? This is England, it's our country. Why do you have to listen to laws from international laws, you know? Let's run our own country as we should be running it.
In an election seen as a crossroads, to take power, Labour need to win in places they've not won since '97, or ever. And so to today's manifesto, about powering growth, according to Keir Starmer. No tricks or surprises, pro-business. But will business back him?
It sounds like there's no rabbits out the hat, there's nothing that we didn't really...
Did you want a rabbit, though, actually?
Yeah, I think so. I think I needed a rabbit to try and pull me further that way. Something, you know, maybe we were never going to get it, something around corporation tax or incentives around investment.
In a constituency that's part industry, part thatched roofs and commuter villages. In the market town of Rugby itself, we've come to a yoga session at the Ben Partnership Community Centre. Trudy was a social worker until illness stopped her working. Her feelings towards the party she's always voted for illustrate another problem for Labour. How to get the balance between appealing to a new audience and keeping your core base of supporters.
I think he probably is alienating the left of the party to a certain extent. But I think probably, like myself, they're so desperate to have a change of government because this government is out for themselves and nobody else.
So people will kind of close their eyes or grit their teeth and tick the box?
I think, yes.
The seismic shift in 2019 means the mood here takes on more significance. And right now, many are undecided and disillusioned.
Claire Fallon, and this is the full list of candidates running in the Rugby constituency.